Hello, Texans. I'm Susana, and this is the Susana Gibb Show. On the podcast today, we have Brian High of North Star Carriage. I first read about Brian in the paper. It was a little bit sensationalistic. Maybe Dallas should ban horse-drawn carriages. And I was like, what? Why would you do such things? I don't know why the council person didn't maybe talk to some carriage people before they just decided to bring it up in the council meeting. But, you know, that's how the Dallas City Council runs sometimes. It's a little bit sensationalistic. Nobody's gotten in fist fights lately, so I guess there's that. On this show, we feature Texas people. We're an insurance agency, and we support our community. We're really glad to be here, and we love being in Texas, and so it's nice to talk to Texas people about what they're up to. You can connect with us at gibagencydallas.com. We love to hear from you. We're going to end this podcast with an insurance tip, but not before we do our new thing, which is our Rando Texas Trivia. So stick around for that. And now, on with the show. On the podcast with me today, I have Brian High at North Star Carriage, and I'm super excited to dig into. You guys made it was some pretty sensational news recently. I don't know if you seem super chill about it, but when I read about you in the newspaper, it felt like it was a big to-do.
It is. It was shocking. I guess initially it was pretty shocking what was being said, but yeah, it was definitely big news. We've been pretty quiet in the community for a lot of years, and to get the ire of someone from out of state for our little business, we were flattered and scared at the beginning, but now we kind of know what's going on, and so we're a little bit more up to speed now for sure.
So for anybody who isn't up to speed on what is going on, what's the short?
So the summary of what's kind of going on right now is this past summer there is an outside special interest group from Chicago that has come down. They are their claim is that they are wanting to ban horse carriages worldwide. We have since learned that they have a little bit bigger goal than just horse carriages. I'm sure we'll get to that in a bit. They've taken video of us for 5-6 months. We've had to call the cops a couple times for stalking. It was a little uncomfortable. And then, of course, they've gone to city council meetings, and they've spoke at the end of city council meetings. So much so that they have bent the ear of one of the committees that is over some commerce in the city of Dallas, to the point where on December 5th, there was a news reporter present, and it came out in a news story that there was the hint that they may consider banning horse carriages in Dallas. We have since learned that playbook is pretty common. They tend to start these campaigns when they know we're all busy with Christmas. Christmas is a very busy time of year for all of us. Yes, I am currently the only permitted carriage service in Dallas, but I'm not the only one operating. There's a whole list of precedent that leads to that. They made it sound like we had all this wrongdoing going on, and that's just not, in fact, true. There's a lot of misinformation that they had said at that time. Anyway, we didn't really have a time to mess with that in December. We were able to gather our thoughts after January 1. That's when the first Channel 8 news article came out. They actually just showed up to my house, and I'm assuming that they called, but we were busy putting stuff up, and we have nothing to hide. We're not doing anything wrong, and so I welcomed them in. We did an interview, very impromptu. I had no preparation. Obviously, I didn't even know they were coming. They literally drove down my driveway. My driveway's pretty long. I thought it was pretty risky on their part, but they just drove right down here and plopped down and said, "Hey, can we do an interview?" And I quit what I was doing. I gave them an interview. And
what's their main beef with the horse carriages?
I'm sure that they operate, under the idea of horse welfare. We've actually had a chance to do some research, and they don't necessarily do anything for horse welfare. I feel bad in a lot of sense that they're not very educated in the world that we live in, and I don't think that's a terrible thing. I mean, it's okay to not know something about somebody's way of life, but before you go to protest it, you might need to do a little bit of research on what we do. Initially, it was what they would consider violations. Was their initial problem with what we did. Little bitty things that were precedents that were set up years ago, and when I say years ago, maybe 2 decades ago, that when the horse carriage industry in Dallas was super concentrated and also concentrated in a very small area. There was a period of time where we had inspectors on the street every weekend, and the laws and the rules that were come up at this time, or that were wrote at this time, I was part of that process, at getting all that done. And then they were down there to enforce them, but there were unwritten rules that we did that maybe were like where we would turn around. Technically speaking, we were facing the wrong way on a one-way street, but this is where they said we should park. And so this is how these things came up. And there's been no need to reinvestigate these policies and this ordinance, because our safety record it's unprecedented. I mean, by PETA's own website, there's been 4 accidents in Dallas in 39 years, and none of them are with me. And so I don't really understand their safety concerns. I mean, if you're really wanting to look at safety concerns, and by no means am I knocking the Lime scooter, but if you want to look at safety concerns, and this is a human welfare issue, you might want to look at the Lime scooter and the safety record just over the last summer when they let them reintroduce into Dallas. I mean, we see accidents and ambulances present for those all the time. And
the Lime scooters.
I ride them.
I'm a huge fan. I think they're so fun, and I have eaten it on a Lime scooter like super hard. So, and I was like, that's it. I'm going home. That hurts. But
they had some horse welfare concerns, I guess, but our ordinance, and it's a very comprehensive ordinance that we have, that when it was written, when there were so many of us down there in the West End back in the early 90s, they didn't have such a good ordinance. And I do think people were able to, there was no regulations. So since there were no regulations, when they came up with the regulations are so stringent, and somebody that really doesn't have a background or a good concept of what is good horse welfare could do this business, because the ordinance outlines how that needs to work. Now, I will say that when that was written pre-2000, is there some updates that we can do? Sure. Yeah, there's probably some updates that we could do, but there's never been a need to, because we're not a rogue industry that's just out there operating willy-nilly with no guidance. Now, if there were wrecks, and if there were, violations and people doing all kinds of nefarious stuff, sure, maybe you need to reinvestigate that, but it's just not been necessary. And the only reason that it caught the attention of City Council is because this outside special interest group, they are a for-profit organization out of Chicago. They're loosely connected to PETA. They distance themselves from PETA because I think it gives them a bad connotation, but that's who funds them. And they went to City Council consistently, to the point where City Council, and it was obvious from the December 5th meeting, and I have a lot of notes on that City Council did not have a real clear understanding of what we do within our own ordinance. So that was kind of shocking to me in the beginning, and we've since been able to address some of that. So we were, we needed a little bit of time, and that wasn't able to happen during the Christmas rides in December.
So I have a couple questions. One, how are they for profit?
So we are putting all that together right now as far as the paper trail, but initially we thought that this was a charitable organization. They're in the middle of a $500,000 fundraiser right now. The Chicago Alliance folks are. I don't know if it's under that heading or one of their subsidiaries, but they're in the middle of a $500,000 fundraiser right now. And the leader of that organization, the one that is kind of, I guess, directing the folks here in Dallas, I mean, by her own admission, she wants to be a full-time animal advocate and not work. I mean, she said that publicly. And
so she can get everybody upset and they'll donate, and then she gets a salary for it. Interesting.
Initially speaking, I was flattered that some special interest group in Chicago was mad at me. Little old small business in Dallas, been doing this for 30 years. And it was flattering in the beginning, but like yesterday or maybe the day before, we were able to speak at council at the end like they had been doing. And I mean, they immediately labeled us with big agriculture, which is just, that's so unhinged. I can't even understand. I mean, people that work in any type of agriculture, I think that people don't understand folks in that world at all, because we move so far away from it, especially in the big cities, that you're several degrees removed from folks that have a farm, if you will. And some of the things that we did post-COVID to bond the community after they'd been shut inside their apartments for so long was, I mean, I didn't need any justification for what we did as far as the well-being of people, but that was one of the greatest displays of, in my opinion, civic duty that you could ever do, being able to bond people after COVID. And Dallas has a real strong presence of downtown living. And so when we were able to bring people together with the horse, because that's really what the attraction is the horse. I mean, make no mistake, the carriages are cute. Our information that we give and the historical is fantastic. It's all great, but the attraction is the horse. I mean, that is the star of the show. Make no mistake how that works.
So let's talk about your horse. Your horses, since we're kind of here, and then I want to move, and then I want to talk about Dallas culture versus Fort Worth culture as relates to, towards horse culture as well. So what kind of horses? Yeah, what kind of horses do you have?
We have everything. Okay, so our operation is, we've been around for a long time, so most of our horses are drafts. I'll just say that. Most of our horses are draft crosses. As I developed in this industry from the early 90s to now, I realized that in the summertime, I needed to have horses that were crossbred that were maybe more suited for the heat, because some of the real big draft horses don't do great in the heat. That's not a working statement. Like, they can just be in the barn and it's just hot, right? Because they're big. The mass is a lot for the heat in Texas. And so
when you say draft horses, is that like the Budweiser horses, I think, which is what a lot of people picture, or are they not quite so big?
Some of them are bigger. So we have some that are even bigger than that. Now, Clydesdales is what everybody says. I think we probably get asked that question a million times. Is that a Clydesdale? And outside of one horse that we have, the answer is always no. So we have predominantly are Percherons or Percheron crosses. Percherons are, in the working world, one of the more popular breeds because of their hardiness, their feet. Their feet are very hard, and they typically have a very good bone structure and lung capacity to do what we do. A lot of people that farm with horses, like the Amish or whatever, they typically will use Belgians or Percherons as their workhorses because they are so hardy, and this is what they do. This is what they're bred for. And most of our horses are either purebred Percherons or some cross that I have developed or bred and bought just for that 4 months of the year. The rest of the year, we use everything. All of our full drafts we use for the rest of the year.
What are some of the rules on how long, like, horses can work, like a work day for a horse?
City of Dallas has a very long list of regulations for us. In the City of Dallas, you can't work a horse more than 8 hours. That is a rule. You can't work under, or you cannot work over certain temperatures. There's no cold regulations, but I mean, these draft horses, they feel great. I mean, this is the cold weather, like from Europe. That's where they're from. Like, they thrive in the cold. I get to be a little bit of a bleeding heart in the winter. You give them all this shelter, and then in the 33-degree freezing rain, they're standing out there just running around like it's nothing. And so it's really kind of fun to see. But we have regulations that we can't work above a certain temperature. 8 hours is the limit. They have to have a break every 10 minutes or 10 minutes every hour. They have regulations on how many days they can work before they can work again, or how many hours they can work before they can work again, how many days a week that they can work, and so on and so forth.
So when you pass a horse that's tied up to a carriage, I don't know how many times I passed, like maybe they're waiting for their next rider or something, and the horse is just kind of cold chilling with its head not up, but in kind of a downward look. What are they doing right then? Resting. Since
this has all happened, I've had to read a lot of vet reports and what have you about people want to know facts. Okay. A lot of this PETA influence that they have made has been based on emotion. We've tried to run all of our response based on facts. Okay. So one of the studies that I read is that a horse standing in that state that you just described is at rest or asleep, much like a human would be if they were leaning against a wall or, just resting. You wouldn't stand on both feet firm unless you're about to do something. You shift one way or the other. The head being down is a relaxed posture. So when you hear reports that the horse is scared or they're spooked or they're always stressed being in that environment, some of the vet studies that I've read, and they've done it even with cortisol levels and glucose reserve. When those horses are in that state, they're at complete rest, like completely calm, complete rest, and physiologically that's been proven. Now, when you touch the bit, those horses will perk up and they're ready to go to work. They're just waiting for a command. It's quite astonishing. And I've also read reports, and I've had to do since then, and we've always known that they're fine, but I just wanted to get some facts to where when people ask these questions, I can answer them factually, that horses horses that are in like the city work life that don't go there, like they feel like there's something missing all the time. So they're always expecting to go because they're creatures of habit, right? So if a horse works 3 or 4 days a week, if you let him off for 3 or 4 weeks, he's missing something in his routine. And they say that even upsets him more than going to work. It's pretty incredible, the vet studies that have been done.
I was wondering that actually, because you think about dogs and like there's working dogs, there's hunting dogs, and I was like, man, there's got to be the same for horses that just are like, no, this is, hey, I wanna work with cattle, and they're good at it, and some that are great to pull carriages.
You should see some of these guys jump in the trailer when it's time to go to work. When it's time to go to work, and you open the trailer and they jump in, you're like, okay, well, it's definitely time to go to work now. It's pretty cool to see. It is.
When I realize this is somewhat of a stretch, but I read elephants, for example, don't actually like people. They don't like people at all, even though they've been trained to work with people. And horses really like people, I think. At least the horses I've known.
If you go stand next to a fence that there's horses in any pasture and you sit there, that horse is going to come up to see you. Because they just genetically, they have a connection to humans. And you can argue the fact all you want. It's just a fact. If you go stand next to any fence where there's horses, they will come and talk to you.
That's so fun. So the other question was, I went to Fort Worth downtown recently. I can't remember the name of the hotel, but it was a gorgeous hotel. And their ceiling chandelier, I'm not sure that it was a chandelier, maybe it was just like an installation, but it was all like steer heads. You go to Fort Worth and they have Cowtown and the stockyards, and they run the Longhorns through, and like they have fully embraced cowboy culture. And Dallas is like, we don't want to talk about our cowboy culture.
Well, you're in
Texas,
feel like there's
so
a big difference? To get away from it. There is a difference in mentality between Dallas and Fort Worth. I worked in Fort Worth for years. Post-COVID, I quit working over there. I know the folks that still work over there. This is probably not the smartest business decision, but it was definitely the right human decision, as there were so many businesses that were lost during COVID. I quit working over there because I was working in both cities so that there was room for everybody to keep their businesses. And so I talked to those people this past week, actually, all of them actually. Fort Worth is a different culture. I love Fort Worth. Fort Worth is definitely one of the best kept secrets in the Southwest, I believe. And they do embrace their culture. That's just who they are. The PETA folks that are here from Chicago, they just launched their attack on Fort Worth here, yesterday in the Star-Telegram, which I thought was a little shocking. They also announced the stock show that they're going to take on them, which goes along with their attack, not just on horse carriages, but agriculture in general, which you're not gonna win that fight in Fort Worth. And so we're a big part of the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo Parade. We had a very large presence in that parade with the director this past year. And Fort Worth is who they are. They're unapologetic about it. And I think that's great.
So what are some of the next steps for you and your work
sure.
to keep operating?
So we are going to council meetings. We're kind of doing a little bit of the playbook that they have done. We've reached out to some outside groups that have combated these PETA folks across the country. This is not a unique campaign to Dallas. Okay, if you look at their Facebook page, it's just a carbon copy in Dallas, in Biloxi, in Indianapolis, in Minneapolis, in Charlotte, in Savannah. It's the exact same thing. It's just changed the name at the end. And we have started our own page that is Save Dallas Horse Carriages. We're putting up a ton of information on that page every day, multiple times a day. A lot of it is just fact finding. So from the December 5 council meeting where they said so many things that were just, they just didn't know a lot about our industry, we've started addressing those on this Facebook page. And so that's our first start. We are reaching out, obviously, to city council members to give them a free Q&A. I've been contacted by several city council members that want to maybe even tour a facility or ask some questions. And we're an open book. I mean, obviously, Channel 8 showed up here, and I said, okay, yeah, let's do an interview. We are also reaching out to our local congressmen. They seem to be pretty helpful. I know that my state representative where I live here in Crum is Dr. Lynn Stuckey, and he is a veterinarian. And so I actually live next door to the guy that hired him back in the 60s when he got out of school. So it's kind of funny. But yeah, so we've reached out to those folks. We're in the very preliminary stages of reaching out to the state representatives, see if there's anything that they can help us with. But it is kind of cool that our state representative in my district is a veterinarian. So that seems to be pretty good. But that's our step right now. As we are able to educate council on stuff, I hope that they'll be able to make a pretty informed decision that they were initially felt like that there was a problem. And just so they know that there's not a problem, we've also met with transportation regulation, and they are going to go back to council and present. They've been asked by council to present some information concerning our industry later on in the spring, maybe April, May-ish. And we are compiling a ton of information for transportation regulation that really has more to do with updates in the last 20 years where there's been no updates, which there hasn't needed to be any updates, but because of the PETA folks, we're going to update. That's fine. And it probably needs to be done anyway. So, but that's what's currently going on right now. Got
it. Okay. All right. Well, if people want to find you, what's the name of your Facebook page?
Well, you can find information on our Facebook page, which is North Star Carriage. You just go on to Facebook. North Star Carriage is on there, especially with all the buzz that we've had. And then the Save Dallas Horse Carriage is another Facebook page that we have that we're putting information out that specifically relates to this situation. I mean, it's just basically information all the time. All the time there's information. And a lot of us are involved. I know that the initial thought was I'm the only one in this fight. And that's so not true. There's upwards of 20 of us around, and we have been able to put Christmas to bed and assemble. And so now we are obviously going to defend ourselves. Right now, the target was on my back because I was the only one permitted in Dallas, but there's a lot of us that are rallying together to make sure that we make this go away.
Good for you. Good for you. All right. So we started a new thing where we are going to do a little bit of Texas trivia. Are you ready to play some rando Texas trivia?
I think so. I hope so.
All right.
Yes, I have.
Here we go.
Ready.
I designed this one for you. These 5 questions, we'll go through the questions first, and then we'll talk about the answers. So,
okay.
The first Spanish horses on record were brought to Texas in what year by the Moscoso expedition?
To Texas?
To Texas.
North America. To Texas.
Texas.
1700.
Fewer than how many purebred Spanish Mustangs are left today?
Fewer than how many Spanish Mustangs are left today?
Mm-hmm.
Fewer than 5 Spanish Mustangs are left today.
What is the state horse of Texas?
It's got to be the quarter horse.
The state had the greatest number of these in 1926, with 1.24 million of these were exported. They were in high demand in oil fields, with lack of paving made trucks impractical. Mechanization on Texas farm brought a decline in the number of these to 400,000 in 1944. What is it?
The workhorse.
Last question. This is the trick one. My mom had 9 horses. They were mostly what variety? I'll give you a hint. They are known for their comfortable gaits and are often preferred by doctors who would ride them to visit patients.
Tennessee Walkers.
Bing, 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 bing. Very good. So the first Spanish horses on record were brought to Texas in 1542 by the Moscoso expedition. I was going to say the
1500s. I was going to say the 1500s.
Yeah, I know. There are actually more Mustangs left than you said. Thank goodness. There are 3,000, just fewer than 3,000 purebred Spanish Mustangs.
In Texas?
No.
No.
I don't know.
Okay.
The internet.
That's cool.
Maybe there's 3 in Texas. We'll give you that one.
That's funny.
The American Quarter Horse was correct. It was. It is tagged as strong, smart, fast, and tough, perfectly suited to the task of carrying cowboys on the long journey from Texas to the railheads of Missouri and Kansas. The next one was a mule.
I forgot about mules. Yeah,
1.24 million mules. Although I gotta say,
I believe that.
Mules, donkeys, jackasses. I cannot keep them straight in my head. Which one is which? Who's the mom? Who's the dad?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then you were totally right. My mom had Tennessee Walkers.
Tennessee Walkers are great. They're fantastic. They're fantastic riding horses. The history of the Tennessee Walker is fascinating as well. Definitely fascinating. So
they were. This was something that I think she had them till I was about 12, but I was little, and I mostly remember like walking underneath them, and they would like kind of nibble at my hair because it was like straw. You know, they just kind of lean over and.
Yes, yes. They're inquisitive animals for sure.
Yes. Horses are so amazing. So when I saw this whole article, I thought, man, I've got to get him on. I know people who do the Christmas carriage ride every year. It's been their family tradition for years and years and years. And while you want to make sure that horses are safe, it's also nice to see horses in the city, right? Like, it's such a cool thing. I would hate to see it go away.
That connection, we see it every year with Christmas, and I have for 30 years. But that connection post-COVID was incredible. I mean, people were bringing their dogs down and dogs and horses don't get along, by the way. It's not a thing. And so dogs would be just like, oh my gosh, there's another animal, they hadn't seen in forever.
What did you do during COVID?
So during COVID, we were shut down for 3 months while the state kind of figured out what needed to be done. And then when they opened things back up to where we could go back to work, I'd take a horse down there and plop down around Clyde Warren Park and just let people come out and pet and talk. And we probably had 4 or 5 people that were coming out during that time. And I'll be honest with you, I just sat there sometimes and let people pet horses while my drivers did rides. And we had a great time being able to see people come out, and they just to hear the stories of, being stuck inside. And, the downtown living is a different environment than maybe where we live, of course. And so it was great to give people some connection to normalcy after what was so weird. And you mentioned Christmas. I mean, that's a tradition that families, they look forward to that all year. I mean, you think of how fast our life is, just in general. To know that you're going to sit with your family for an hour and do something that you do every year, it's kind of like opening presents, right? Like, everyone looks forward to that moment. And everyone looks forward to that moment together, to be riding around looking at Christmas lights. And I mean, we make a big deal about the horses because a lot of our horses compete across the country in farm team competitions and what have you. And if you look on our Facebook page, we're starting to release some stuff from Denver where we were last week. It's why I couldn't talk last week. And people just love to have that connection. The horses that they rode with at Christmas are now going to Denver to compete. And they pet those horses in December, and now they see them working, really at their potential. If you want to know the truth about it, and so it's just a connection that people and horses have. You can't you can't trivialize it, but with some PETA organization saying that we're mean. That's just not true.
Yeah.
It's just false.
Yeah.
Just false.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you for taking time to talk
Thank you for
with
having
me
me on.
today. I appreciate
sure.
it. All right. Truly, I'm going to have to get my hands on some horses now. I really just want to pet that little bitty soft spot on the top of their nose right before their nostrils. I want to feed them some carrots and feel their little lips on my hands. Horses are so cool, and they do need to be protected. And if there are rules in place to keep them protected, then that's great. And now, our insurance tip of the week. A lot of people don't know this, but how often you drive can affect your auto insurance rates. Most people, the default is about 8,000 to 12,000 miles. And now they can tell exactly how far you drive, so you can't really cheat on it. They look at oil changes, they look at your tire changes, etc. Because think about it, they always record your miles when you're there. But if you don't drive a ton, then you can often get discounts on your auto rates. So if you're one of those drivers, get with your insurance agent and make sure that you are getting all the discounts that you are available for. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate that you spent some time with us. Please reach out to us at gibbagencydallas.com. We love to hear from you, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Have a good one.